Welcome back to another We Ourselves video. Today I want to add my thoughts to the Star Wars Force argument. And the reason that I'm talking about this today is because we keep getting the stories about the new Rey movie that's coming out. And Disney is really doubling down on Rey as the future of Star Wars. And so I think it's very timely to talk about this. Given the sentiment that everybody can use the Force if they just work hard enough, I find it odd that the people who support this notion are really just trying to justify Disney's persistence in writing borderline Mary Sue protagonists, i.e. Rey. Individuals that, regardless of any natural talent, nevertheless possess the amazing abilities to do anything they want almost immediately without any kind of connection to any kind of work or preparation on their part. And that's why I feel like Rey is just a herald of a much darker future. So let's dive into my take on the subject. I've done Star Wars videos before, but I've never really discussed how the Force was used in the extended universe, the Star Wars extended universe, versus the new Disney Star Wars canon. Although I've watched other YouTube creators' videos on the subject, I never felt the need to discuss it myself until now. And the reason being, I came across a video the other day where the individual proclaimed that George Lucas himself said that anyone can use the Force and that the Ahsoka series confirmed it. Now, I've done videos again on Ahsoka in the series and all the shortcomings I felt that it had. But anyway, this individual acknowledged that talent makes a difference and that Anakin had a lot of midichlorians that allowed him to do a lot of good things. But in the end, even George Lucas said that anybody can use the Force if they worked hard enough. Rey and other people like Sabine Wren, as redone for the Ahsoka series, and not in the Rebels series, that Sabine Wren being able to use the Force immediately when she wasn't able just a minute ago was okay because George Lucas said that anybody can use it. Of course, you could tell by my tone, I think the argument is totally nonsense. And no matter what George Lucas might have said here or there, whether it's taken out of context or not, we don't have to rely on that. All we have to do is look at what George Lucas produced in his original trilogy and in the prequels. Because within the prequels, within that storyline and in the original, but within the prequels, because the person mentioned Anakin, George Lucas had Anakin trained for 10 years at the Jedi Temple with all kind of Jedi and Jedi Masters. And yes, Anakin did have a high midichlorian count, even higher than Yoda. And he had a lot of natural ability, and he was already using the Force to aid him in what he naturally liked to do, working with machines and flying and stuff like that. Subconsciously, unknown to him, he was using the Force even then, but even he had to train for years. And to drive home that point, when Anakin and the more experienced Obi-Wan Kenobi went up against Count Dooku, they got their behinds handed to them. All this, by the way, keep in mind, all this despite Anakin also being the chosen one. So given what Lucas showed us in the original trilogy and the prequels about the Force, why is this concept so difficult for some people to either understand or accept, even now? Why is there this desire to say that somebody can just pick up something, i.e. the Force, and immediately use it? And even worse, because it never stops there. In most of the cases where you have characters who do this, the person outperforms people who have actually been trained in doing that very thing. And I have to say that all of us, no matter our religion, our ethnic background, our nationality, our sexual preference, our identity, no matter all of that, we all collectively know that's not how it works in life. You know, movies and TV shows inspire us. That's why franchises like Star Wars and Star Trek, among others, have been cited by people in all kinds of professions, engineers, astronauts, doctors, etc. All of these people have stated that they were inspired by the shows and the movies that they watch. You even have a whole series called The Movies That Made Us, The Toys That Made Us. Often those toys are related to some kind of movie or TV show franchise. And when it comes to fantasy and science fiction, which can be very fantastical, that's the very reason why you have world building, lore, mythos, and character development. Those things ground those stories and concepts that are relatable and applicable to audiences of all ages. I mean, think about it. There's a reason why Yoda's sayings from The Empire Strikes Back, after all of these decades, still resonate culturally. Quotes such as, "Do or do not, there is no try," have become part of our cultural framework. When Yoda tells Luke that he needs to unlearn everything that he's learned, those things resonate with us for a reason. And for those of us who like sci-fi and fantasy and have spent all the years and money, loving these worlds and traveling in these worlds is why we have so many problems with Rey and the redone Sabine, because Sabine in the animated series Rebels was fine. Sabine, as she was changed by Dave Filoni for the Ahsoka series, is just another paler version of Rey, in my opinion. But there's a reason why we have so many problems with these characters. And when you look at Marvel, what they're doing with Captain Peggy Carter after 2 seasons of What If, I mean, she just does more and more and more amazing things that she shouldn't be able to do. And you have the new Native American woman in the series, the What If series. All of these characters are capable of instantly doing things they've never done before, nor had really any kind of training or background to show that they were inclined to do these things. And so when I would think about this, and it's like, well, how can you explain this to people who seem that they want to miss the point so often? And I was thinking about, well, what's that missing way to explain it? So what's a different way to look at it? And I just happened to be watching an interview that was done by Bill Bellamy, and he was interviewing Godfrey, the comedian. And in there, they talked about spending all this time focusing on something so much that you start to write it into your subconscious and your DNA. It becomes who you are. You are this thing. And once you get to that level, that's when the magic happens. That's why sometimes as a comedian, they can go out and they can do this absolutely perfect set. Everything's just home run, but then the next night they might not be able to get to that same point. Well, in the midst of that conversation, it's a really good interview, and I'll post a link to it. Godfrey mentioned that he met Jerry Seinfeld one night. And Seinfeld asked him, we said, well, how long have you been in comedy? And Godfrey at the time, thinking that, he's a colleague. Of course, he's not comparing himself to Seinfeld, but still, feeling that he's a colleague. He answered that he had been in comedy for 9 years at the time. And Seinfeld said to him, it's like, okay, you're a 9-year-old to me in this field. And Godfrey was shocked by that. But then when he thought about it, he said it makes sense. He was literally like a 9-year-old to somebody like Seinfeld, who had been a comedian for, 20 years or more. So in essence, Seinfeld was the adult at that moment when it came to comedy, and Godfrey was at a different level than him. He was a 9-year-old. And I said, that's really interesting, because if you take that and you apply it to somebody like Anakin, we see that in Attack of the Clones, Anakin was essentially a 10-year-old when it came to being a Jedi. Even though he was physically 18 or 19, he was like a 10-year-old. Now we understand why Yoda and the rest of the Jedi Council felt Anakin was too old to start training at 9, because by then he should have been the equivalent of a 9-year-old in relation to the Jedi training, because he should have started when he was basically an infant. And that's why the Council reacted the way they did to him, because he was literally a kid, a 10-year-old, when he was placed on the Council full of Jedi adults. And it also makes sense why Yoda hesitated to train Luke, who was literally 18 or 19 and was just introduced to the Force. He was literally a baby in the Force, and he was a grown man. And that's why Yoda had to tell him, look, you got to unlearn everything you learned. You got 20 years of learning and ideas and ways of doing things burnt into your subconscious that you got to unlearn quick, and that's what I mean. George Lucas knew this. I don't care what kind of interview he may have did and some line that he dropped. When it came to putting the money where his mouth was, when he produced his 6 films, this is the consistent message that a person has to train. They have to focus. They have to become the thing that they want to be, and that takes time. And throughout the history, written or otherwise, of these two genres, fantasy and sci-fi, there's always been that rite of passage. There's always been that training in there. Get back to the Godfrey thing. When a person focuses on a particular skill set or a particular thing, when they focus on it and they really become good at that, and it becomes encoded, it becomes part of their subconscious. It becomes part of almost their DNA. When you get to that point, that's when the real magic can come, because now you have all this groundwork that you laid. So now that you can reach that higher level, you can make those higher connections. That's what Anakin had to learn to do. That's what Luke learned to do until Disney came along and they said he was a total failure. In the extended universe, you saw the extension of that. You even saw it with Leia when she went back and started doing her Jedi training. But when you lay that groundwork, that's when you have the creative leaps. And those leaps don't come to somebody who's never laid the groundwork. The leaps come to people who have the wherewithal and the know-how to even be there to do this thing in the first place. Netflix just released a documentary, The Greatest Night in Pop. And it's basically about We Are the World and how Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones, I think it was the night of the Grammy Awards, or the Grammy Awards. And afterwards, they brought all these talented people together to record this. And it was really interesting because Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson were supposed to write the song. They were working with the producer and they were going to put all this together because something similar had just been done in England. And so they were using that as a framework and an inspiration. They actually had the guy who put on the show in England to come over and talk to them. And so they were supposed to write the song, but they waited until the last minute to actually do it. And then when they were under the gun, Lionel Richie says that, well, he doesn't know where the lyrics and stuff came from. It was just like almost being possessed in a way. But they were able to come together and put the song together. And that's the same thing that Godfrey talked about in that interview, is once you lay that groundwork, then the magic happens. And I remember Lionel Richie saying all the time that, well, the reason we put it off because Michael and I, we know we're able to write. We weren't worried about that. Each of us in our own right, we are writers and producers and musicians, so we know how to do it. In other words, they laid the groundwork. But it was just that acknowledgement that they knew they could write because they had done it. They were songwriters. They were artists. They had no doubt that they can do it because they had spent all the hours and years doing that. Just as Godfrey says, when you spend all those hours doing the stand-up comedy and stuff like that, and you lay that groundwork, then that's when you are able to make those leaps and you do that higher level output at times. And that's when you go to the next level, the magical level. And for me, that's the missing piece when we're explaining the Force and Anakin and Star Wars as enunciated by George Lucas. Yes, everybody can experience the Force. The Force interacts with all living things. And yes, everybody can and probably can do a few things with the Force. And yes, talent and midi-chlorian levels do play a part. But even there, according to George Lucas, you still have to train, even with natural talent. But in today's Star Wars and other franchises like Marvel, under Disney, not surprisingly, and unfortunately, they've made it the face of women and diversity, the idea is you don't have to train. And everybody, including the adults who support these characters and like these characters, they know that's not true. They know it. And that's why so many people were having problems with these Mary Sue characters. And I just want to say something else as a creative person, and there are different things in my life that I do creatively. When you bypass the whole training thing, now I'm not one of those people that get all hyped up on the drama queens who says blood, sweat, and tears and all that stuff, because particularly for creative people, even if it's hard work, for you, when you're focused in on something that you like and you're building your competency in it, it's not work per se, because that's when you lose track of time. That's when you go into the zone. If it's geared towards something you naturally like to do and it's your natural inclination, it's actually fun. The work is fun. The process is fun. The learning is fun. The aha moments that come eventually are fun. But in today's Star Wars and Marvel and things like that, they're throwing that out the window. Rey is the epitome of that. Again, if you apply the Seinfeld idea to Rey, she was literally a newborn, but yet she's doing amazing things immediately. There's no character development. And that's why Star Wars fans, traditional Star Wars fans, have rejected her. And that's why the stories are unbelievable. There is no verisimilitude, and I like that word, because no matter what fantasy subgenre you're talking about, there needs to be a verisimilitude. The world needs to make sense. Within the world that you created, things need to make sense. And the people that are doing it now, they don't care about these things. They just come in, they don't understand the characters. You know, the whole thing with the writers who are writing a lot of the Marvel, they don't even know the comic book characters, and they're told, in fact, they're actively told not to even read the stuff. In fact, they were hired because they didn't know the stuff. But without that understanding, then there's no way to keep the mythos right. There's no way to keep the verisimilitude there, the realness there. The rules and the ins and outs of the universe are thrown out the window. And so at the end of the day, I guess what I'm really saying is that I don't think everybody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everybody has something that they're naturally good at. So everybody has things that they are inclined towards. And when you focus on that, and when you make yourself better in that, and when you go down that road, I mean, that's what everybody's talking about right now. Metaphysics, self-help, and all these things. That's what everybody's talking about right now. Not everybody can do everything, but everybody can do something. There is something or some things that you are good at. There are some things that when you do, you lose track of time. And it's scientific. It's been noted that there are certain things that happen inside your brain and everything where you shut off all your references to time so that time literally stands still for you. You lose time because you're so focused in on the things that you love to do. When you do that, then you are in that mode, and when you lay the groundwork on that, that's when the magic happens. That's when you take those leaps to that next level. But you only do that by going down the path that is for you. That's what I'm saying. Not everybody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And for people who do this thing, it's ludicrous to say that this other thing is less important. Everything is important for a person on that path. But what we're seeing here in Disney and stuff, first of all, they're getting rid of that. You don't go down a path, you don't train on the path, you don't get involved on the path, you just simply do things. And not only do you do things, but you have to do everything. Again, Captain Carter in the What If series. In that last episode, it just got crazy. She's using every weapon, everything. She immediately knows how to do everything. And to me, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to tell people, to tell young people, to tell a generation. Because we're in a day and age where you have AI, not automation. We've already had automation and everything. Even our programs are just a collection of automated processes. It's just they're collected in macros, and you press a button and it does all the things so you don't have to do each one of the steps. Now we're literally getting into AI. And in an era where we're getting into AI, to have a company as large as Disney push the idea that you don't have to spend time focusing on something, you don't have to spend time on training yourself, you don't have to spend time on finding your path, the thing that lights you up and makes you really happy and you love doing it and you would do it even if you never got paid for it. The idea that we're in this era now where everything that you have has to be monetized. So you're not doing it because you love it, you're doing it because you can monetize. You have a little bit of expertise in this area, that area, so let's monetize it. Let's be content creators. And again, I know I'm saying that as a content creator, but we're in this era where we're teaching the whole generation, and you have adults that are signing off on it, that everybody can do everything, and you don't have to really spend time and focus on one thing. And that's dangerous because, again, that saying makes sense. You can be a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And when you're in an AI world, when you're on the cusp of being in an AI world, that's a dangerous thing to be in, because if AI starts doing everything, then you have a whole bunch of people who were never taught how to focus themselves in a particular path and to excel at that path. And particularly when you have the machines and the programs that can do it for you, you're going to have a populace that don't know how to do anything. And what happens if the machines break down and you don't have them to do it for you? And I also think it's interesting, in this time, we have the second movie of Dune coming out. And even though the movie itself doesn't really go into it, the heart of Dune is that very story, the battle between humanity and AI. In the Dune world, the backstory is that they developed AI and thinking machines, and the thinking machines, just like Skynet, and Terminator, which ironically, Terminator takes more from Dune than Star Wars ever did. The AI, self-aware, it took over and it killed trillions of human beings and decimated entire planets until the humans were able to rise up and defeat the thinking machines. And at that point, they outlawed any thinking machines. That is the background for Dune. And I think it's interesting that the second part of the first book is coming out next month at a time where in the real world we are dealing and grappling with, should we stop the headlong rush for AI or should we allow it to continue? I think it's very interesting that movie has been rebooted and is coming out now when we are literally facing the question that in that Dune world they faced, and they made the wrong decision and they paid the price because AI took over and tried to eradicate humanity. And so at this juncture where we see the headlong rush from companies and things like that to use AI, and creative people are talking about right now that AI can't mimic what they do, and it's true, they don't care about that. They just want to shut down the creative thought for the majority of people. And you have Disney exporting the idea that no, you don't find your path, no, you don't train, no, you don't work on something, no, you don't focus on anything, no, you don't lay the groundwork. You're special. You can just do anything you want. Just pick it up and do it. To have generations of people who don't focus their own ability to learn things, to master things, to become really good at things, to find their pathway. If you don't do that, we are literally capable of creating in this 3D matrix environment that we live in, we're literally able to create what we saw in the Matrix. We're almost at the verge of creating what we saw in the backstory of Dune. We're literally on the verge of creating all of the apocalyptic, scenarios where AI took over. Even if it's not literally a Skynet, the fact that if you're pushing this idea that no, you don't have to really focus and develop your abilities and find your pathway. Even if you just develop a whole generation of people who don't have any kind of skills, then you don't need a Skynet. You already have the AI that's controlled by the corporations that's going to decide your life anyway. You've made a de facto Matrix world. You've literally taken this reality and you made it into the Matrix. Only instead of the machines, it'll be the people in charge of corporations that are in charge of the AI that's making all the life decisions for you. And you have a group of people who have no skill sets. They can't think for themselves. And so again, I think it's interesting that the second part of Dune's coming out because that is the backstory of that. They laid the groundwork, they found the spice, and the spice took them to the next level. It took the Bene Gesserit to the next level. It took the Guild to the next level. It took the Mentats to the next level. That is the heart of traditional science fiction and fantasy. That is what Godfrey was talking about. That is what Lionel Richie was talking about when he was, doing We Are the World. All of them had laid the groundwork. And once they had the groundwork laid, that's when the magic came in and they went to the next level. All of this is the same thing. And the fact that Disney is giving you a message, is pushing out a message, and unfortunately they're slapping the face of diversity on that message so that any backlash comes to the diverse people and not the people who aren't diverse that are making these decisions, which is really diabolical in my mind. But they're telling you, no, don't worry about that. You're just good because you're you. And it's baloney. It's nonsense. And it's very dangerous at a time when these same corporations are hell-bent on using AI to take all of our ability to make choices away from us. And I just think that Rey was the herald, almost like Silver Surfer was the herald of Galactus. Rey was the herald of all the stuff that we've had since then, and I think all the stuff they're going to continue to try to give us. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the lie. But those are my thoughts on it. You can tell me what you think in the comments. As always, like, subscribe, and also check out the other videos I have on my site. And I will see you the next time.